All right, we good? Okay. Thanks for having me to Australia. I wanted to come here since I was a little kid, so thanks for bringing me out. I traveled 36 hours. I got here 11 p.m. last night, and I stepped out of my hotel this morning, and I was like, oh, it's Vancouver. I'm sure it's not. I've only seen the city for 20 minutes, but okay. Here's my talk. Who am I? I'm Gordon McGladdery. I run a studio out of BC, Canada, called A Show in the Pit. We work on anything audio related. We also have a trailer production wing of the company, and here are a few of the games we worked on. We've shipped 60-ish titles, including some like wonderful Australian games: Untitled Goose Game, Gubbins. We just launched the trailer for Dogpile like 2 days ago, which I did the music on, so that was fun. And we also shipped our own game in October of 2023, which we're still working on. It's a game about fish. If there's, and I realize like my talk description, the title was just me, with no highlights. That was my fault. I didn't send them anything. But so we're going to talk about business. And if there's one thing I want people to take away from this talk, it's this quite simple concept of the difference between a finite game and an infinite game. This is a book written by James Carse in 1984, popularized for business by Simon Sinek more recently. You don't got to read the books, you just have to understand this concept. Like every business book can be a 2-page essay. And the idea is that some games are designed to be finished and won, and some games exist to prolong the game. So it's a difference between chess and playing catch with your kids. And the problem is that far too many businesses approach running a business like something they can win, which by definition you can't do. You can't win business. You need to approach it like an infinite game. And we're going to get to the point on that by talking about a lot of gardening. Here's mine. I'm not very good. It's on my deck this year. We'll move into the yard next year. So how many people here like run their own businesses? How many intend to? And how many are working stiffs? Okay, cool. So most of us want to know how to run our business so that we don't have to, cause pain to our staff. The rest of us want to know how to identify a company that cares about our lives. So, as a novice gardener, I'm interested in the disparity between two extreme forms of growing food. The first one I want to talk about is industrial farming. I want us to ask ourselves, what's the goal of industrial farming? And is the goal to make food? I'd argue no. If that were the case, then farm workers in America probably wouldn't have an above average level of food insecurity, while at the same time, America throws away 30 to 40% of the food that they produce. So if making food were the goal, then they're not doing a very good job. And we're going to drag on America a lot. We're all from the Commonwealth here. So the goal of industrial farming is to make money. It's also responsible for the vast majority of the food that we eat, and to a certain extent, maybe it has to be that way, but I also think we've kind of painted ourselves into a corner by following these finite models. So a few things about factory farms. You can have one up and running real fast, like 6 to 18 months. You can have a corn farm. In doing so, I think this might be a bad slide. Better switch around. Okay, so in doing so, you're trading resilience for ambition. And a lot of the following points are trading resilience for ambition. And one of those things is they're not diversified. They usually grow one thing. And they'll do everything they can to, like, probably minimize waste for cost reasons within that one thing they're making, but it's one thing. It's not a diversified model. The end is money. Feeding people is the means to that end. And therefore, it's a finite business model. And yeah, if this sounds familiar, this is how most businesses are run. And for how common it is and for how much it produces and how much it's responsible for, it's actually like incredibly fragile. It takes one little disease to bring an entire sector to its knees. And here's the thing about disease is that it's inevitable. There's always going to be another one. You don't know what it's going to be, how it's going to look, but there's another one coming. And if a system gets sick and it's not a diverse system, and it's traded resilience for ambition, well, then you get like this egg snafu that the US experienced last year because they just weren't prepared. So what's going on in games? We're not farmers. And the thing, also with disease is they're only as harmful as the lack of preparation allows them to be. So I feel like in games, it's easy to point our fingers at like the Bobby Kodaks of the world and their $375 million bonuses. And that's, fair. That's ridiculous. But I've barely touched AAA games. None of the developers I work with, are getting bonuses that could fund like 400 indie games a year. So, like, what's going on? Here's my extremely condensed take on why the past few years have been difficult. So when I started in games around 2011, this was how a game was made. Usually it was done with, the money that somebody had left over from their day job. You'd make the game, you'd throw it on Steam, you'd hope it would make money, and if it did, then you made another game. Over the past decade, the model now looks like this, where it's, you get a pitch together or a vertical slice, you try to find someone else to pay for the game, then you put your team together, you build the game, you sell the thing, and if it makes money, then great, but if it doesn't, then, you just go through the process again. And I don't have huge complaints with this model, but it's not a resilient model. And resilience is like my big thing. So let's talk about macroeconomics. Exciting. So macroeconomics also has diseases, and they're also inevitable, and you also don't know what they're going to look like. So let's talk about what the one we just experienced looked like. This is BRAD. Brad. His friends call him B-Rad because he tells them to. And this part of the talk is it's meaner than it needs to be. I like publishers. I work with lots of publishers, but it was funnier to do it like this. So in 2019, B-Rad decided he was going to be a publisher. He had seen other people in the game space make a bunch of money, and he always liked playing games. And he wanted to get in on that action. And he made a bunch of money off crypto or some bullshit. So he's going to take out a $10 million corporate bank loan and fund 10 projects with it. Brad hasn't shipped any games, so he doesn't have a current revenue stream. Therefore, this is going to be a lump sum loan, which means he doesn't have to pay it back until it reaches maturity in 10 years, but he's going to pay a slightly higher interest rate on it. So now it's March 2020. When he's decided to take out this loan, he's able to get a 4.25% interest rate on it. So at the end of his term, he's going to owe the bank about $15 million, which, pretty scary number. But games are strong. The market is cramped, but it's not crazy. And social media still has really powerful, low cost means of getting the word out. And he doesn't know this yet, but everybody's going to be stuck at home for a while, so games are going to spike even harder. So fast forward to September 2023. Brad managed to make a tidy little profit off the last venture. 2 games didn't finish, 3 lost money, but 2 were modestly successful and 1 was a hit. So he was able to pay off that loan and then some. So just got to repeat the strategy again. Not quite. So during this time, there were 22% more games released in 2022 than in 2020, and it looks like it's going to be like worse by the time the next games finish. No big deal. He'll just be a little bit more judicious about the games he chooses to make. Except wages have also gone up 6%. That's also like fine. That's the rate of inflation. But right now, it's looking like it's going to be about 30% more expensive to do the same thing again. But wait. This was like the big problem. This is when I started seeing people I was working with shut down. Interest rates have gone way up. So for the same loan now, the best rate he can get is going to be like 9.5%, which means at the end of the term, he's going to owe the bank $25 million instead of 15. So the entire value of the loan more than last time. So the gamble's not the same, and that's what a lot of people were doing. They're gambling on leveraged capital to make games, and they just had to be so judicious that a lot of studios just kind of, or a lot of publishers and funding parties just sort of froze up. And so this is just, I don't take a picture of it. I'm not going to get into this one too much. But there was this thing that also happened because, during COVID, there was a flush with cash. And this wasn't just the COVID thing. This has been a decade-long process of historically low interest rates, where we started to see that second model of how games were made to become the prevalent way that games were being made. And that also has raised player expectations. So now players have very high quality bars that cost a lot more to make. And it employed a lot of people, and that was a great thing, but it's also not super sustainable. So we've been watching this big old bubble burst. And the B-Rads of the world are trying to figure out how to navigate these, new normal, which is the same as the old normal of 15 years ago. But what happened is a lot of developers, sort of frog in a pot, started to rely on other people's money, which from a sustainability standpoint, we can't really do. We have to slow down. What a lot of developers have done, and not with anything with no evil in their hearts, but traded resilience for ambition. So that's clearly an over-exaggeration and an oversimplification. There are many, many other factors involved. But the main point is that this is just one scenario of something that can go wrong that is out of our control. And so we just have to think about the fact that something will go wrong. Something's always going to go wrong. So we can't frame what we've been going through as this calamity. It's a challenge, and there's always going to be another challenge. I'm sure a lot of the business owners here feel the feeling that I've felt before, where running a business is you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then it drops, and you're like, okay, deal with that. What's the next one going to be? And so we aren't the ones that can do anything about this big stuff. All we can do is prepare. We can do with what is in our control, because disease is inevitable. So macroeconomically, I'm a paranoid person, always have been. In another life, I would have nuclear orange macaroni and cheese in a bunker somewhere. But what I have been doing, just because it's my nature since I started a business, is, yeah, just being very preparing for the worst at all times. And a fun way to put this is the other form of gardening I wanted to talk about, which probably fewer people have heard of. And it's called permaculture. And it's some real hippie shit. And the idea of permaculture is that you build these complex systems that are interconnected and very like hardy. And so like the water is like flowing its natural route, just like a lot of gravity fed. But the main thing is that nothing in this picture serves just one purpose. So a tree is not, like a walnut tree is not just like a nut machine. Like in factory farming, it would just be like, well, here's our field of nut machines. It's, it does produce nuts. It's also a trellis for vining plants. When the leaves fall off, they go to the ground, and the deep roots had put minerals that shallow-rooted plants couldn't reach into the leaves, and then that'll decompose, and it's redistributing those minerals. So like the big thing is that nothing does just one thing. Nothing serves just one purpose. Okay, so a few of those notes on permaculture is that, unlike factory farming, it is very cheap to start, but it takes a really long time. It takes like 10 years to get a permaculture garden established. In doing so, though, it prioritizes resilience over ambition. It is extremely diversified. It's kind of the whole point, diversity is strength. And it exists to grow food with minimal labor and be a beneficial addition to its environment. I was hoping it'd be like perfectly mirrored, and the end is to grow food, but really the end is not to grow food. The end is to build a robust system, and growing food is like a pleasant side effect. And therefore it's an infinite model. So our mission statement is to generate good jobs. And we do that with doing good sound or doing whatever thing that is cool to a really high degree of quality. But the pillar, so my friend Shane did a good talk at Full Indie Summit a few years ago called Put a Castle in the Middle of It. And he was talking about Zelda and Disney World and how you always have, a castle in the center. So you've got it's a guiding light, it's a pillar, it's a design pillar. And our design pillar is that make good jobs. Everything is working towards that. I also want to make it super clear that, having a successful business does not happen without luck, not in this industry. So we've had a lot of that, and I just want to make people aware that I know that. And of course, I'm like, a lot of this stuff, I'm retrofitting this stuff. Like, I did not have like a genius vision and put it into action. It just, things happened this way, and looking back, I realized that we did a lot of things the right way, and now that is part of the design. So a little bit of history about us. So being an employer was not something I ever wanted to do. It's not something I was excited about. I just wanted to write tunes, and then what the fuck? Here we are. So I finished school, I started working on games. My second game I worked on was a game called Rogue Legacy, and it was a big hit, and that just accelerated things for me. And it turned out I was good at landing gigs, in no small part to just having a game that people knew the name of. So I started getting a lot of gigs, and then around 2015, I was working on like 18 projects by myself, and I needed help. Otherwise, I was going to completely crash and burn because I didn't know how to say no. So I had to be an employer. So a few things about employing people. Don't crush people's dreams. So at Vancouver's film school, like all my teachers were industry burnouts. And it's jarring going to a school to like do your dream job by people who would be just like absolutely chewed up and spit out by the industry you're thinking about going into, who were all very, very good and very, very passionate about what they did and what they were teaching. So I think we all know what crushes dreams. And I think the best way to not crush dreams of the people that are working for you is to treat staff like luxury cars. So our burn rate at a show in the pit with like how much we spend on staff, and everyone here that runs a business knows like your biggest expense is your staff. I could buy, I think it's a Lamborghini Gallardo every quarter with what we pay people to work for us. And if I just did that, if I bought 4 Lamborghinis a year and then just ran them into the ground, just like just grinding the clutch, never changing the oil, and just like threw them out, I'd be a dick. I think everybody can agree that that would be a dick move. Yet when we do it with people, that's just like working in entertainment. And that seems crazy. Like from a business standpoint, ethics aside, that's a crazy thing to do. I'm skipping this. So here's what I call like the good stuff feedback loop. We want people who work for us to be working on stuff that they like to work on, not crunching, not burning out, because happy people make better stuff. People buying stuff like better stuff. That stuff sells better than bad stuff. And then when it sells better, more people hear about that good stuff you made and will hire you to do more good stuff for them. Here are some results of this from last year for us. We got GDC awards, we got a BAFTA, we also got a Hugo award for Caves of Cud. And these are other teams, like development teams, that I think also embrace a lot of these philosophies that I'm talking about today. So after I graduated, my mentor, who was also a VFS grad, he took me to Sound Lab in Redmond, Washington, where he was working at the time. It was like a purpose-built sound studio where they're working on a bunch of big Microsoft IPs. Then within a year or two, Microsoft just like dissolved it. It was gone, despite working on a lot of big hit titles. They did stuff for Halo. And it's like so dissolved, I can't find like any mention of it on the internet at all anymore. And insignificant to Microsoft, but I found that lack of downward loyalty from the bean counters to the people that were working for them, pretty gross. And I still wasn't planning on being an employer at that time, but I'd had bad bosses before, and if I was going to be an employer, I was not going to do it like that. And one of the main things is that I'll get into in more depth here is that we have to treat the people that we're working with as full humans rather than just cogs who do one thing. And I think this is just a huge part of resilience. Is like, I'm sure anyone here that's been laid off from a big company, if you have worked for them, just wished someone had asked you if you had any ideas, for how you could not be laid off if the company did something a bit differently, or what other, everybody's so talented now. I don't do just one thing. Nobody on my team just does one thing. Everybody's very interested in a lot of stuff and pretty good at a lot of things. So like a permaculture garden, everybody can serve more than one purpose. And we shouldn't be forcing people into that, but if they want to, if they need to, then we should do that. So when 2022, when that big interest spike happened, I was like, this is going to be bad. And I was right. It was. from March 2022 to December 2024 were the most stressful times for my company. We went from cash flow positive every month, often doubling revenue year over year, to like cash flow neutral or negative for 8 to 10 months running. And I didn't know how long it was going to last, but I knew that we had prepared like pretty well. And also, so we had people on our team who just didn't have sound design work to do. So harkening back to that last point, I put this huge list together of like stuff you can do when you don't have the thing that you were hired to do. Like you can invest time in developing more of our internal tech. You can take an online course to get better at something that you think is interesting. Have you noodled with web design before? Website's looking kind of old. Maybe we could update it. Update the reel. Start contacting people for jobs. Like we had gotten into a pretty comfortable situation where we didn't have to look for work anymore. We hadn't looked for work for years, so we'd forgotten about sales completely. So getting in touch with previous clients and just making everybody feel like they weren't powerless that's the big point, I think, is nobody wants to feel like a cog. Everybody wants to have their opinion heard and do something about it if things are feeling like they're in trouble. So a couple years out of school, too much work, decided it was time to hire people, so I hired M. And again, I didn't want to hire anybody, so I hired M as a contractor, and then it just turned out I needed her all the time. And somebody told me, well, you have to hire her legally. So I was like, fine. But that actually turned out to be a pretty good model. We hire very slowly. We contract people for a long time because I also don't want to give people the illusion of stability. I don't want to hire people as a full-time employee until they know that that's like their job for keeps and they don't have to worry about a job anymore. That's just something that they can take off their mental plate. So that's what we've done. We've done that 16 times now. And yeah, the main thing is taking risks is fine, but giving people the illusion that they are financially stable when they're not, I think is a cruel thing to do. And yeah, Em's been with us like 8 years now, and she's now our studio creative director, and she's going to be helping run the company pretty soon. Well, she does already, but like official C-suite is coming. So, huge left turn. Dragging America a bit more. I want to talk about aquifers. So this big red one running down the middle is the Ogallala aquifer. So these are the aquifers of the United States, who I'm sure you're all aware have done like a great job about water conservation. So 30% of that big one in the middle has already been drained for irrigation of factory farms. With experts calculating 39% more of it will be gone in the next 50 years. It refills at 15% of the rate that they're pumping it dry. So the math is pretty simple here. That breadbasket of America is like empty by the end of the century at the current rate. And when has America ever slowed down at anything? And for a business, the aquifer is your contingency fund. In personal finance, your emergency fund. Our emergency fund, we tally as 6 months for if somehow all of our work dried up, which is something that would be really weird for us, we could still run for 6 months. That's our current minimum. We try to add a month every year that we're in business. So next year will be 7 months, 8 months after the year after that, and so on. Until it's so tapped out that we don't have to worry about it anymore. I don't think we need more than a year's worth because we're not a single project company and we have a lot of operational diversity. And one of the ways that we do this is we're not super competitive with our wages. And Don't jump on me yet, I'll explain. I think in an indie environment, because we are an indie games company, we work on some like AAA-esque games, but they're all, I can talk to the boss with all of them. So not that many layers of bureaucracy. I think it makes sense to be competitive with AAA wages when it makes sense to be competitive with AAA wages. And for 8 years, it made sense to do so. The past 4 years, it has not made sense to do so because it's not sustainable for indie companies because we're not seeing cash injections of leveraged capital. And I've shipped over 60 games. I have a general idea of how much things cost. I have a general idea of how well things sell when we work on stuff, and I saw a lot of frightening things over the past 6-7 years, and I've seen what happens when those frightening things turn out to be true. But like I said, it makes sense to be competitive when you can, and how we do that is through super generous bonuses. And before I come off as bloviating about how great I am, despite the hair, washboard abs, I'm not Jesus. I want to be rich. Oh man, I really want to be rich. But I also want to be able to sleep at night. So before I hired Am, I talked to another studio head, and I was like, how do you do bonuses? And he told me, I swear to God, he told me, oh, we give 50% of our net back to our staff. And I was like, cool, brilliant, I'm doing that. I stole it, I contractually implemented it, and then hired Am as our first employee with that model on. I talked to the same studio head a few months later, and I was like, oh, I did that thing. And he was like, what thing? 50% of our profits are going to our staff. And he's like, whoa, Gord, we only do 15. And I was like, fuck. I killed my company. But then I thought about it, and I was like, wait, this math works. 0% of $0 is $0. It's scalable, feels good to pay out huge bonuses, and so we did it. We just hung on to that, and we're actually going to be bumping it up pretty soon, because once the contingency is already tapped out, what are you doing with the rest of that money? We'll be giving a lot more of it to the team. And what this allows us to do, and then we also we squish all the bonuses into the one fiscal year. So rather than waiting for all the taxes to be done and paid, we get as close to an estimation of what our net income is a month before the fiscal year ends, and then we pay those bonuses out because then we claim less income, we pay less taxes, and more money to the staff at the end of the day. And here's how it looks. So our base wage exists to reward your skill set, your experience, and then the bonuses exist to reward your seniority at the company. So it's this sort of inverse logarithmic curve. When you start at the company, you get a very small slice of the bonus pool, and then it jumps up quite quickly, sort of a built-in probationary period. And then after you've been at the company for a long time, you kind of fall into the you've been here a long time bucket. So your bonuses are not that different. If someone's been at the company for 12 years versus 10 years, their bonuses are going to be very similar. And what this allows us to do is that we've got, this any contractor, you've got this lumpy income, and you have dry spells and peaks and valleys, and it allows us to kind of peanut butter smooth over those hard spots. So when things are tough, everybody still has a livable wage, and when things are great, everybody's making good competitive money. So yeah, let's talk about some diversity. It will come as no surprise probably that I was a tree planter for 5 summers to pay my way through university. There's tree planting here, right? I met some Aussies out there. So I thought originally that we were environmentalist hippies and we're replanting forests, and and rah-rah us. But then I realized, no, we're industrial farmers. Because I worked as a brusher and a chemical sprayer, and my whole job was to like kill the trees that aren't the ones that are worth money. Over the course of my tree planting career, I planted about 500,000 trees, and then I killed a lot of the trees that weren't worth money. What I do know is I planted like a shitload of pine. Pine is fast-growing. It's a valuable crop tree, and generally it's quite resilient. Enter this little bastard. So this is the mountain pine beetle. It's an invasive species, but it was previously kept in check by cold winters. Then climate change happened, and this guy wiped out 731 million cubic meters, or about 54% of the mercantile timber in BC by 2015. So this is like probably near where I grew up, or this is what it looked like where I grew up. Everything was dead. We just had entire forests of dead trees. And now every summer, those burn. Because we planted a bunch of the same tree, and a bunch of them are all dead, because like a factory farm, we invested in these monocultures rather than building robust ecosystems. And then now they burn and they make the whole thing worse. So talking about diversity, like important because it's the right thing to do, but also just from a business standpoint, if we have diversity amongst our personnel, then we can attract a more diverse client pool. We can perform more diverse operations because we're going to be getting more diverse solutions from our staff. And then we can have more diversified income streams. And all of these things result in more financial security and sustainability. So, like, we don't have just sound designers. We've got people that can do graphic design, who can do both. We've got video editors. We've got multiple languages on the team. So we can do, like we have done, just in-house localization for trailers and stuff. Nothing major for games, because that's not our specialty, but you know, we've, yeah, did I already say, like, yeah, seven different languages. And then we also have diverse operations for our income. It grants us a certain amount of like vertical integration. So like I said at the beginning, it's not just sound, it's not just music. We also are building audio systems. We're producing trailers. We're making our own game. And then we can mix and match all those things. If we get an audio client, we can be like, oh, also we do trailers. If we get a trailer client, we can say, oh, we also do audio. And then having worked on a game, then we can speak about the process of making games with a lot more clarity and knowledge than we would if we were just working on one small piece of the puzzle. Okay, so in closing, yeah, my time is good. So what this is all about is I didn't want to start a company to be like a business guy. And I wanted to enhance lives, I think, if I was going to be an employer. And so we all know this idiom, time is money. Narrow take on time, even from a business sense. Time is like the vial in which memories catalyze. And those memories are every individual's like proof of existence. Time is life. So I think about dying a lot, probably more than I should. Probably a lot of people here do too. And I think that, you know, when that time comes, I don't want to be thinking about myself as a devourer of life. I think that asking people for their time, for their lives, it should be repaid with tremendous grace. About 5 years ago, we bought a cabin with the company. And then I think about a year later, we implemented a 4-day work week. The cabin does not make any money. It's plumbing has burst twice. I'm getting the deck repaired right now and dealing with a deer mouse infestation. But what it does really well is make memories, this proof of existence. And I think a pretty good existence, not just for me and my staff, but for my kids and my kids' friends and my staff and their friends and their pets. And I think that everyone or a lot of the people in this room could be making a lot more money doing something else, but you've chosen to take part in the artistic process. And that begs the question, like, what is art? And I'd argue that art is pain relief. I've done this talk so many times. And every time I'm like, I'm not going to cry. Cheat code for making yourself cry during a talk is put your kids in it. And I know, like, we're working in games, but we're taking part in art to relieve the pain of total strangers. And I think that's a pretty noble cause. And I think those of us who find ourselves in the position to empower you to continue doing that should do that to the greatest extent of our ability. And that artists who live good lives are going to make better art. Arguable. But I think artists that have life experience are going to make better art and are going to do better work. And we're not EMTs, we're not saving lives, but we're providing pain relief for people that might be EMTs or nurses or surgeons. And I think that doing art to relieve the pain of total strangers is an act of grace. And I do think that grace is an infinite model, and that we should continue to do it. And that's it. Thank you. All right, thanks a lot. That was actually the wrong set of slides. I did a full update, and I must have sent them the link to the wrong one. Or I updated the original instead of the copy. But we got through it. Are there any questions from the audience? I got a couple here, but not many.
Is it possible, when reaching out to have your game business, is it always good for work with someone else in the gaming industry, as well as setting up on your own, just as long as you either keep it a secret or something? That makes sense?
If you're setting up so the question is, if you're setting up the game part of your business versus what?
Versus if you're working working for someone.
Yeah.
And you're saying your game business, is that possible?
So if you already have a job and you want to expand into freelancing, legally dubious. It depends on what your contract is like with your employer. So if you're working in an entirely different field, it's probably not going to be a problem. But you do want to make sure that contractually they don't own everything that you do, which is the case with some contracts. Because you can keep it secret, but I would never say, yeah, go for it with that in mind, because it's not going to be secret forever. And if they find out that you release something that you made while you're working for them that they technically own, that could become a huge issue for you. So I wouldn't do anything behind your employer's back.
So you probably more recommend a non-game dev job?
There are a lot of developers who are totally fine with you having a side project. Just make sure that you're clear on where you stand on that. Yeah, a lot of the time, the bigger the company, the less of a chance that they'll be cool with it. But if it's a totally different genre, a lot of the time if you're working on something that is like indirect competition. If you're making a game like their game, then yeah, they're not going to let you. But if you're doing a cozy game and your day job is on a shooter, it might be okay. In the black.
What's your dream for like where you'd like the company to go? Because you said like sacrificing resilience for ambition, ambition for resilience. Are there things that, you know, like the cabin, for example, I presume at some point was a dream of something you'd like to offer. What's the next thing that you'd like to offer going down the line, or what's like an ambition? Because I presume your ambition hasn't turned up. Another cabin?
So the question is where I want the company to go. Sorry, they asked me to repeat everything for the stream. I think another big part of this is to get your ambition under control. Honestly, I'm pretty happy right now. There aren't any big leaps forward that I have in mind. And actually, like, so my dream right now that I'm working on is to not run the company anymore. So a few of the other senior staff are going to step in and start taking over some of the managerial duties so that I can start doing more of what I got into this to do, which is writing music, which I never stopped doing, but it has become hard to juggle. So yeah, I think the infinite growth model of business is another poisonous thing that we shouldn't be holding in high regard. So right now I'm happy to stop growing, but if whoever takes over the company wants to continue growing and doing more cool stuff because they have ideas, then I'll absolutely support them in that. I believe Black Hat for first, yeah.
Do you have any tips on managing ambition and, like, I think we all feel like being too consumed by ambition. Is there any tips on sort of balancing that? You mentioned grace, which is honestly was so lovely to hear. Yeah, I'd love to kind of know your thoughts behind that a little bit more.
So do I have thoughts on managing ambition? ADHD medication. Pretty big one for me. Having kids, another pretty big one. But yeah, in seriousness, I think it is, managing ambition is just making sure you're not biting off more than you can chew. And your health will tell you when that's happened. Your health and stress levels will tell you when that's happened. So I can't give you success stories from my past on that front because usually I would hit a wall. So try to not do that. Checkers.
I'm curious, like, because you were saying it wasn't your intention initially to become like a business owner, like, but you kind of have to learn, like, when you're setting it up, all of the legal and business stuff. But once you realized you were kind of interested in doing that, did you go off and like learn business things first before starting it up, or was it kind of like, I'll learn it as I go?
The question is, did I learn business stuff before I started doing business? I don't think so. I talked to other friends. I knew other studio owners because I had to work with them. So I'm always talking to people about how they do things and how versus how we do things. So I'm always gathering ideas from other people that run companies. But I did not go to business school. I did not read up. I'm not formally trained. Yeah. Cool. Black jacket.
You talked a lot about like diversity and not doing just one thing, and so I wanted to kind of get your thoughts about how to manage that with like, in terms of, like for me, for example, I have so many different interests and trying to pursue all of them at the same time, none of them really truly flourish in any meaningful way. So how do you kind of manage having diversity while still kind of progressing in a particular area?
Okay, so the question is, how do you manage having diversity while trying to flourish at one thing, maybe? Yeah. So for me, I chased where things were successful. So I originally wanted to work in film, and it wasn't successful. The games I worked on were. So I was like, well, I guess I'll walk down that path for a while. So it's a constant if I could bring it back to like the metaphor, like the permaculture garden is exploiting, natural organic advantages. So you want to be just keeping an eye out on where opportunities are, and then like you can't force the opportunity. You have to identify it and then you fill the gap. That's why our trailer company exists, is because we did audio on a lot of trailers, and I knew who the trailer producers that we worked with a lot were, and then two of them got hired, like Kurt got hired by Devolver and Marlon got hired by Brace Yourself Games, and they were like doing 70% of the trailers at that time. So I was like, oh, there's a hole in the market. So I talked to some people I know that were doing editing for like corporate ads and stuff, and was like, hey, do you guys want to do trailers for games? And they were like, hell yeah. So it is definitely wherever the opportunities are, you go there rather than trying to wedge yourself in somewhere where there is no room. Back corner.
Hey, just a quick question, because you were saying near the end that you found creating things was a sort of a stress management ideal, I guess, like a catharsis of sorts.
Yes.
I was just wondering if there's a notable example that you've had where it really like sunk in as this kind of way of dealing with stress and the pressures outside of the work when you're creating.
So as a creator, yeah. So yeah, in my talk, it's pain relief for the consumer. Or that's the point I was trying to make, and I hope I did. But it absolutely does work like that for a creator as well. For me, like anytime I'm working on music and I'm in that flow state, I could stay there forever. So, but as a creator, with regard to it being received by the audience, the most notable games, like we've worked on quite a few, but for me, because I actually worked on it a lot, because a lot of the games now I don't get to touch anymore, other people get to do all the creative stuff, but we worked on a game called Wander Song that I did like 100 songs for, and it landed with people so hard, and I was getting fan mail for years, just as the music person, not as the creator of the game. And it was like deep, long letters about how it changed their lives and got them out of a dark place and that kind of thing. So, yeah, it works for everybody. Yeah, creative work is cool. How much time we got? We got quite a bit of time. Okay, you're first. Green.
Sure. You talked a lot about hiring people with a diverse skill set. A lot of people here are probably looking at approaching, looking for jobs. What would you say is a good way to show, your diverse range of skills? Because lots of us have maybe a show reel for one specific thing, but how do you package yourself in a way that's hireable for you?
With regard to applying for jobs in general, I mean, you do want to customize your application for the job that you're applying for, which I know is like a lot of work and is painful, rather than, scattershot, copy and paste emails. And customize that application for the job that is being, advertised. But then, yeah, throw it in there. I also do this, I also do this, I also do this. If you're in audio, like have a design reel, but also have a technical reel or an audio programming reel. You just throw it in there any way you can. There's no formalized way to do it. Like personally, I don't even read resumes. So I would be watching a reel of your best work, because if it's sound design, I want to know that, you got the knack. A lot of the other stuff can be trained. But then if there's also a little reel of other stuff that you can do, I think that's a pretty cool thing to throw in. Black shirt.
As a team leader, how do you approach conversations and situations where people in your team or partners aren't exactly pulling their weight, and avoiding that frustration build up and approaching that conversation in a sustainable way that does not squash that passion or demoralize them as much?
The question is, how do I approach conversations where someone may or may not be pulling their weight? So these don't really come up for us very much, and I'm not sure necessarily what we're doing. Like, we haven't designed things that way. I don't know if we've just managed to hire very well, but I do think part of it is that if something is going wrong, if somebody is underperforming who usually performs better, it shouldn't be approached as like a kick in the ass, you know? It should be approached with something's not right here. And so there's probably a good chance that they're going through some personal trouble. And so I think rather than like, hey, you're underperforming, get it together, it's like, hey, is everything okay? And then you, as a leader, should be looking for ways to reduce their load rather than like cracking the whip for them to catch up. Yeah. Black shirt.
How competitive is your employment process? A bit like that BC folks and that. Oh, that's someone else.
No, it's yours. Yeah. Question is how competitive is our employment process? Ours is really, we just have a long list of people. It's more network based and organic and reference based. So we don't really advertise positions because often we don't know we have a position. Usually it's like we need a little bit of help on this thing, and then that thing gets bigger and bigger, and then we're like, oh, okay, we need you all the time. So if we were to advertise a position, it would be very, very, very competitive. But we hire so slowly and so rarely that I've never had to do that yet. And maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. That could be open to criticism for sure. Cool, blue sweater.
You mentioned early on that you had trouble saying no to jobs.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of led to this diversity. Have you changed at all? And do you have to now kind of actively manage not to do this?
Yeah, I mean, it takes care of itself now. Like, I have a producer who's going to be taking over as like basically the new boss, and she knows what everyone's bandwidth is. And if something comes in and we just don't have time to do it, then we'll say no. If something comes in, we'll run it by the team. We'll be like, does anyone want to work on this? And if nobody puts up their hand, then we'll say like, sorry. But we'll always refer them to like other people that might be interested in. Cool, I'll do one more from the crowd and then I'll knock out these ones down here. Green sweater.
Yeah, I'm curious to know, where does the name A Shell in the Pit come from in the octopus imagery?
Oh, okay. A Shell in the Pit was my solo artist name, and I just never rebranded. But it's from War of the Worlds. Yeah, it's a passage I really like, which is about hubris, and actually does kind of tie into it ties into the philosophy a bit, because it's about approaching things with a wild degree of overconfidence and then, getting destroyed by aliens. So yeah, calamity and always preparing for another calamity and not thinking that you can survive anything. Okay, let me fire through the ones that were put on the stream here. So Edward asked, what are the best signs that potential employees can look for that indicate a healthy and sustainable business before they sign a contract to work for them? This is like an entire conversation. I think the contract itself is a pretty big signifier. Are there things that in the contract that limit what you can do yourself? Are they providing benefits? What's the vacation time like? What is the bonus structure like? And there are just a lot of vibe-based things as well. And I think if you are asking during an interview just like what their visions are for the company and what their priorities are and listening to what they have to say about it, will give you a lot of clues. Because I definitely can't get into every single particular thing that a company that is not employee first will do. But I think employee first companies will be very loud about it, and they should be. Next question on here. How do you identify the kind of employees that bring a versatile skill set and are happy and capable of being used in diverse ways? I find that the people that we hire, usually they have to be very autodidactic and interested and keen and just like doing stuff. And I find that just by virtue of those qualities, they're probably good at a few things because they're just interested people that are interested in a lot of stuff. Okay, and last question, what advice do you have for individuals with diverse skills applying for jobs that is for one skill set? I think we already kind of answered that one, didn't we? Yeah, put it in there. Put in lots of asides or bring it up during the interview. Like, I think yeah, just make it known. Be loud. I think, like Sarah's just said in her talk, nepo baby yourself. I do that all the time. Some of my that's why I got to do music on Five Nights at Freddy's. I think there's a lot of just like, I can do that. We'll go really far. Cool. Out of time. Thank you very much. Cool, and I'm around all weekend. So.